Today's video is sponsored by Capture One. See the link in the description to get 20% off your first purchase. When you think about a studio, or wherever it is you edit your photos, what is it really? It's your own factory to generate creativity, a place where you can dive into the photos that resonate with you. Today I was out capturing the love, joy, and nostalgia that exists with family. It's all around us, connected together through the power of photography. And now I'm back in the studio. Let's start the show. Once you're back in the studio, you have several options to get your photos off of your iPad. The first option is to create a photo album on your iPad and then save it into the Capture One cloud. In order for this to work, you're going to need both recent versions of Capture One on iPad and Capture One Pro on your workstation. So once you have the images that you want added to the album, tap the three dots right here and choose Add to Cloud. That will start the synchronization process between your iPad and the Capture One cloud. Now on Capture One Pro on your workstation, there's a couple of things you need to do. First, hover your mouse over the top area right here, right-click and select Customize Toolbar. You'll see a window pop up of all kinds of choices. You want to find Cloud Transfer. Here it is, right here. You see that? Drag that up to the top and drop it right there. And then you simply click on Cloud Transfer, and that will open up the Cloud Transfer window where you can import from your album that you had created earlier on the iPad. And it starts the process of bringing in the photos that I was working on my iPad that are stored in the Capture One cloud now down to my Capture One Pro copy on my workstation. And there they are. Check it out. That is certainly a convenient and straightforward workflow to consider, where you're working on the same copies of your photos stored in the cloud on your iPad, which you then synchronize and bring back down into the desktop version of the software. Now, another method that you can use that does not rely on Capture One's cloud photo album, but instead goes directly from your iPad to your Mac, is to use Apple's AirDrop file transfer. This is great. You don't even need to plug in your iPad. Just make sure that you have Bluetooth enabled on both devices and that you're signed into the same iCloud account and on the same Wi-Fi network. Go ahead and select the photos that you want to transfer. Down at the bottom, tap on Share, and I'm going to choose Originals, tap Export, and you'll see the AirDrop icon appear right here. I'm going to go ahead and tap my workstation right now, and a message will appear on your workstation as it starts transferring your files. And what AirDrop is doing is transferring your photos from your iPad straight to your Downloads folder. And of course, you can import them right from there by clicking on Import, choose the Downloads folder. There they are. Click on Import All. And Capture One will bring them right into your session or to your catalog. Keep in mind that there are other options as well. There's quite a long list of how to transfer files back and forth from iPad to Mac and so forth. I'm not going to go over every single one of them here, but those are my two favorites. Okay, so I just switched and I'm now back here in Studio A. This isn't really where I edit my photos, but I find it the best place to do the teaching, and I prefer being right here. So with that said, let's now talk about style brushes. Style brushes are a fairly recent feature that was added to Capture One, and it is by far one of my favorite features on the program. Now, I've discussed regular styles in Capture One before on this channel, and styles are a great way to bring in custom looks to your images. The only issue, though, with regular styles is that when you apply them, they affect the entire image. So you apply a style and everything in your image gets affected. And there are so many times where you'll have a group of images, but you just want to have one part of the image adjusted. Let me show you now what I'm talking about, and I think this will make sense. Okay, have a look at this image right here. This was shot on a Fujifilm X-T4 camera with a 50 to 140 millimeter lens. And for the most part, I like the shot, but for the sake of teaching you style brushes, let me show you some adjustments that we can make. Style brushes are located in the Style Brushes panel. You see that right here. And if you don't see it in any of these areas of Capture One, right-click anywhere inside one of the panels, select Add Tool, and then choose Style Brushes. Inside the Style Brushes, you have two areas: Custom Style Brushes and Built-in Style Brushes. If you go into Built-in Style Brushes, there are three categories. And this is great because Capture One will already give you some pre-built style brushes for very common adjustment different scenarios. In fact, you may not even need to build your own custom ones after you see these. They're broken down into 3 categories: color, enhancements, and light and contrast. So let's check out light and contrast. You can adjust the brightness up or down, contrast, etc. Let's pick brightness, and we're going to choose the increase brightness choice right here. Now, whenever it is you select a style brush, several things happen when you first do that. The first is that your cursor now becomes a brush, much the same as if you had clicked the brush tool right here. And if you right-click, you've got all of your brush settings. You can change the size, the hardness or softness of the brush, the opacity, and most importantly, the flow. The flow more or less refers to how powerful the brush is as you are brushing across it. And I would say a good starting point is right about here. We'll talk about brush with layer and eraser with brush in just a sec. So the very next thing it does is create a brand new layer, and it names it for you. Now, right now you see background, as that's always the layer, and there is no layer yet. It's when you first start to use the brush. So I'm going to go ahead and now use the brush. Have a look at this. The minute I start painting, it created a layer called brightness. Now you can rename this to anything you want. You can right-click it and select rename and call it whatever you want. We'll just keep the default for now. And as you are painting over it, you can see the red indicates where it's being applied. Okay, so here it is before, here it is after. Pretty basic stuff. And just so you know, you can see what it's actually doing if you take a look at the other panels. For example, have a look at exposure. Look, brightness is cranked all the way up. I didn't do that. The style brush did that. But if I click on background, look at exposure now. Brightness does this. No brightness is this. You see that? So by painting on with this brush, you are basically painting on all of these preset adjustments. Let's try a different one now. And this time I'm going to add a little bit of detail and clarity, but certainly not to the model's face. We're going to do it to the aircraft. So let's go back to our built-in style brushes. We'll go to enhancements and we'll choose add detail. Now, just to show you, I'm going to go back to this other panel showing our layers. Watch what happens when I start to paint on this brush. There it is. You see it, add detail. There it is right there. And I'm adding detail to the rivets of the plane. I guess these are called rivets. And just so you know, it's not painting it red. Red is where it's being applied, okay? I'm just saying. Here's before, here's after. Here's before, here's after. Now, if you find that it's maybe too much overall, you can adjust the opacity. Simply click on the layer that you've already used the style brush for and bring down the opacity just like this. So let's talk about those other 2 options. Link your brush with layer or link your eraser with brush. As an example, I made my brush really large. You see that? And the reason I made it this large was I wanted to paint this tire. And let's say for a series of photos that I'm going to be applying this to, I generally want a larger brush because this particular style brush, I usually apply it to a larger area. But what happens if I switch over to a different layer, say the brightness one? If I go to make the brightness brush smaller, okay, like this, once I'm done, if I happen to click over to the other one, in this case, add detail, look, it's larger. It's the original size. It remembered the size I used before. Back to here, it's small. Back to here, it's large. Now the other one, link eraser with brush. If you tick that, what that basically means is that if you go and you click on the eraser tool, I'll do that right here. The eraser tool is the same size as the brush relative to each layer, okay? So in this case, look at the size of the eraser tool here. But watch what happens when I go here with the eraser tool. You see that? I don't have to readjust the eraser tool. It matches the size of the brush for the specific layer. If you are at all still confused by this, just tick both boxes, keep them checked, and try that. I think you'll find you'll prefer that the best. Okay, so we've covered the built-in style brushes, but how do you create your own style brush and then use that for a series of photos? I'm gonna go ahead and close out the built-in style brushes. We're not gonna use them. So in this next example, I have a series of photos shot at an automotive junkyard, okay? And I wanna actually change the color of the red car. I'm not really loving the shade of red, the hue that it is. So the very first thing I need to do is create what's called a new filled adjustment layer. Go to layers, click on the little plus, Add new filled adjustment layer. You see that right there? Boom. And you can name it something. I'm gonna go ahead and call this Fix Car, okay? So now I'm gonna start editing this image, and the only thing I'm gonna care about is the red paint on the car. I don't care about the models, I don't care about the background, I don't care about anything else. Just the car. So I'm gonna go down here and first thing, crank up the saturation. That's too saturated. But you know what? I need to do it this way so that you can see it on a small screen on YouTube. So I'm gonna be cranking these beyond what I normally would for the purposes of the video and teaching. So I crank up the saturation. I'm also going to change the hue. Check it out. Have a look at that. Totally changed it. Here it is before, here it is after. Before, after. Now, obviously, I would not keep it like this because it also affects the other elements in the image, right? The models are oversaturated. The extra red has now been applied to their legs. There's too much saturation. You see that? Changing the hue has affected their skin tones. Ugh, we don't want that. We only wanted the car. So now that I have the adjustments made to this layer, I am going to right-click the layer and choose Save Adjustments as Style Brush. And this will pop up a window asking me, well, what adjustments? Remember, I could make other adjustments, not just saturation. I can do all kinds of stuff to the image. All of this stuff here, I'm just going to accept the default. When this window first comes up, it selects everything, and it's up to you to deselect. But at this point, for what I'm teaching you today, Color Editor Basic, that was pretty much it. So I'm going to click on Save. I'm going to call this Fix Car, Save. Let's go back and look at our custom style brushes. There it is right there. Now, if we go back to the image where the layers are, I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer because remember, I don't want all the other stuff in the image affected. So now that I've done that, I basically now have this image back to what it was. And at this point, any image that has a red car in it, if I like that and I want to make that similar adjustment, I just tick this like that. I can use that custom style brush that I am now going to paint on. Just like this. There's before, there's after. Before, after. Now, it was not applied as strong as I may have liked. And in that case, you want to right-click and increase the flow of your brush. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and crank it up quite a bit. Now I'm going to continue painting a little bit more, but with a much stronger flow. If you screw something up and you paint in the wrong area, you can use the eraser right here and erase something that you've done. See that? And I can quickly apply it to this image right here. Again, a very different angle of the car. Go to Style, Fix Car, and just start painting. Okay, so let's say that while you're using it and you're going through your photos, that you realize you want to make a few adjustments to your brush. You basically want to edit that brush. In this case, I'd like actually more saturation. Simply click on that layer, right? Fix Car, and I'm going to go ahead and increase the saturation even more. And I'll actually turn down the exposure a little bit as well. Then hover over that layer, right click, Save Adjustment as Style Brush. In this case, it's going to pick up my exposure adjustment and the color change that I made. Save, and I'm going to call it Fix Car again. And it says, do you want to replace it? Yes, I do. Boom. Now, if I go to another image, choose it again for that image, there you go. Before, after, before, after. And it will give me the same consistent color of red in all the shots that I'm using the style brush to paint. Pal to Tech Editor here, and there was something that I forgot to really mention in the video. A couple of tips and tricks for style brushes that I want to show you right now. So the first thing is that you can save a style brush as a style if you like it and you want to apply it to the entire image. For example, I have a super saturated style brush. Obviously, what does it do? It saturates it, right? But if I happen to like that look, I could save it as a full-blown style and apply it to the entire image. Simply right-click on the layer that the style brush had created and choose Save Adjustments as Style. Pick the ones you want, and the changes that you've already made with the style brush will already be pre-selected. Click Save and name it whatever you want. Now, if you go to your custom styles, there it is. You see that? And it's applying it to the entire image. The second tip is that you can turn styles, pre-existing styles, into Style Brushes. So you want to go to your styles and presets. I'm going to go ahead and just choose one of my already built-in styles for this example, and we'll go with Creative 7. Here it is. This is what it looks like with Creative 7, and here's what it looks like without. Right-click on it and say Apply to New Layer, okay? Not the background, but the new layer. There it is right there. Then hover over it, right-click, Save Adjustments as Style Brush. Up comes the Save Style Brush window with the adjustments pre-selected. Go ahead and click Save and name it whatever you want. Now, when you have an image you want to apply it to, just go ahead and use it as a style brush. Go to your style brushes, custom style brush. There it is right here. Click on it and start painting. Before, after, before, after. Now, there's one little gotcha with this. It won't work with all possible styles. Let me show you what I mean. Some of the built-in styles, particularly the legacy ones, black and white, okay, when you right-click it, you don't have the ability to apply it to a new layer. And I have not been able to convert those specific styles into style brushes. However, if you know of a way to do that, please let me know, and I will make a special video on just that. Let's do a quick final tip now. In this example, I'm going to choose the Add Detail style brush, and I'm going to add some detail right here. Let's say you want to move your entire mask. Press and hold down the Command key on a Mac or Control on Windows. You'll notice that your brush now turns to a select cursor. Now click and drag. Look at this. I can drag it right over to here. That's a pretty cool tip, I have to say, and that was told to me by none other than the people who work at Capture One. So thank you folks for doing that. I better get back to the video now. I'll see you in the studio. Now the time has come to talk about keyboard shortcuts. Hold on. I find videos that talk about keyboard shortcuts just as boring as the rest of you, I'm sure. But these keyboard shortcuts are different, and they're a bit special. In order to use the speed edit keys, you need to make sure they're enabled. And the way you do that is you go into your preferences, and under the general tab at the bottom, there is a little area that says enable speed edit. You see that right there? Make sure that this box is ticked. Now, you know the way that normal keyboard shortcuts work. You press a key or a combination of one or two keys together, boom, and something happens. Like Command E, and that immediately pulls up the exposure highlight warning. But with speed edit keys, you need to press and hold them down. So what exactly do they do? Let's take a look at them in the preferences window. Go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and then there's a new category called Speed Edit Keys, and they basically adjust things like exposure, dynamic range, white balance, and so forth. And the way that they're laid out is not like the letter is the same thing as what you're editing. For example, the speed edit key for contrast is not C for contrast. That's not how it works. Rather, on the keyboard itself, the way your keyboard is laid out with your Q, W, E, R, you have A, S, D, F. As you go down the keys, you know, boom, 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 like that, so you go down the menus in Capture One. So for example, press and hold down the key. I will do that. Pressing and holding down B, and while you're holding the key down, you use an alternate method to actually make the adjustment. And that can depend on what type of a mouse that you're using. For example, this Logitech MX Master, there is a little scroll wheel at the top. On an Apple mouse, you just slide your finger across the top, okay? Whichever device that you have, there is a way to kind of make that work with this shortcut key. So what I do is I press and hold down the key, and then I start to make the adjustment by moving, and in this case, the scroll wheel just a little bit. Look, 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 look. See that? While I'm holding down the key. It is so much faster than having to menu dive, particularly if you want to apply it to a number of images at once. So for example, I'm going to apply it to all 4 of these images, pressing down B, holding it, and then rotating the wheel on the mouse. Have a look at that. Now, something to note, if you are applying these speed edits to multiple images and you have layers in those images that you're applying them to, okay, it will not apply them to those top layers. It will only apply them to the background layer. Let me show you what I mean. So for example, let's say on this image right here, I have a layer, okay, that I'm working on, right? But I want to use my speed edit key to apply my changes to, say, all 4 of these selected photos, right? When I go and I press the key on the keyboard to hold it down and I start to make the adjustment, there I go, making the adjustment here. Notice that it's not applying it to this top layer. Instead, it is applying it to the background layer. You see that? And this is really important to remember if you're using these speed edit keys. If you are editing multiple images at once at the same time, select, 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 hold down the key, make your adjustment. If you're doing that, then it is going to apply those edits to the background layer and not to any other layers that you may have on those images. But if you're only editing one image, right? You only have one image selected and you're applying your speed edit key adjustment to that, it will apply it to whatever layer you have selected, as you would think it would. Now, as to why I love speed edit keys, and I need to get a little personal here. Photography to me often falls into two separate groups. Photos that I would go out and I would shoot for a client, and then photos that I shoot of my family. Now, for client photos, I don't use the speed edit keys quite as often. I mean, from time to time, they can definitely be handy and save me considerable amount of time. But for personal photos, well, let's just say I take a lot of photos of my children growing up. I'm the kind of dad where I love to go back to a place I've been with my kids and shoot them at that same place, only now everything else is the same, but only now they're older, right? And the result of that is I shoot a tremendous amount of photos. And to be perfectly honest with you, if I applied the same level of edit perfection to my family photos that I'm constantly shooting, if I applied that same level of perfection to those that I do with, say, client work, I would be indoors in front of Capture One all the time. That's all I would be doing. And I don't want that, because for me, creativity has no boundaries. And I don't want any boundaries by being in the studio or in front of an editor when I could be out making memories. So with those kinds of photos, I can do all that by select, boom, 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 all the photos, hold down the key that I want, and then rotate this, and it will quickly apply it to all of them, and then boom, I could move on. Because in the end, and I said this in an earlier video, photography is everywhere, and it has the ability to capture the love and the beauty that exists in our lives. But that doesn't always mean that I want to be spending hours and hours editing, even on Capture One. But Capture One does allow me the best of both worlds, and I get the flexibility and the most powerful editing features the program has to offer, which, especially for Fujifilm RAW files, I think are the best around. If anyone is interested in learning about Capture One, be sure to see the link in the description to get 20% off your first purchase of Capture One Pro. Being able to capture the moment, live in the moment, and share the moment, Capture One is always there, right in that endless stream of creativity that has no boundaries.